You must apologize! I command you!
The first insult came beneath a chandelier bright enough to make every diamond in Bellamere Hall glitter like a tiny blade. Clara Whitmore stood at the edge of the ballroom in a gown of pale blue silk, her gloved hands folded around a leather portfolio, while 100 carefully dressed strangers watched her become the evening's entertainment. She had been invited because the Duke of Bellamere required a skilled hand, not because society desired her company. For 6 months, Clara had examined ancient surveys, copied weathered boundaries, and transformed forgotten estate records into precise maps. Her work was quiet, exacting, and valuable. Yet among titled families, usefulness was tolerated more readily than independence. Across the room stood Duke Julian Ashcombe, 31 years old, severe in a black evening coat embroidered with dark blue thread. His posture possessed the effortless authority of a man who had never needed to announce his rank. He was handsome in the restrained manner of a marble statue. Dark hair swept neatly from his forehead, strong features, and gray eyes that seemed accustomed to judging rooms before entering them. Clara had spoken with him only twice. The first time he had thanked her for correcting a survey. The second time he had looked at her map for several minutes and quietly said, "You notice what other people overlook." She had remembered those words. Now, beneath the golden light, she wondered whether he would remember them too. At dinner, Lord Sebastian Vale raised his glass to the railway project that promised to connect Bellamere with London. The assembled gentlemen praised its progress, while ladies murmured about prosperity, fashionable travel, and the future of the estate. Clara listened until her eyes fell upon a large map displayed beside the marble fireplace. Her breath caught. She knew that map. More importantly, she knew it was wrong. The boundary surrounding Ashmere village had been moved eastward by nearly half a mile. Land historically held by the villagers had been absorbed into the Duke's property, while a strip of common ground had disappeared entirely. Clara stared at the altered lines. Someone had not made a mistake. Someone had redrawn history. She crossed the room before caution could stop her. "My apologies, Your Grace," she said, addressing Julian, "but this survey cannot be correct." The conversation died so quickly that the ticking of the mantel clock suddenly sounded thunderous. Julian turned toward her. "Cannot." Clara pointed to the map. "The eastern boundary follows the old church road. This line places it beyond the stream." Lord Sebastian laughed softly. "Miss Whitmore, surely you do not intend to challenge a document prepared by men who have managed Bellamere lands for generations." "I intend only to challenge an error." Lady Beatrice Ashcombe, the Duke's formidable aunt, rose from her chair. Her violet gown shimmered as she approached, her expression tightening with every step. "You were invited here to provide maps," she said. "Not to embarrass the family whose roof shelters you." A flush climbed Clara's throat, but she kept her shoulders straight. "The truth is not an embarrassment, Lady Beatrice." A murmur passed through the room. Julian's gaze sharpened. For one suspended moment, Clara saw something behind his composure. Not anger, but warning. He understood what she had done. She had crossed the invisible line separating useful people from powerful ones. He dismissed the gathering shortly afterward. In the library, firelight flickered across shelves of dark leather and polished wood. Julian stood beside the mantel, one hand resting against the carved stone, while Clara faced him with her portfolio pressed against her chest. "You have accused my estate of falsifying its boundaries before half the county. I have accused a map of being false. Do you understand the distinction between accuracy and insult?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Then you understand the position you have placed me in." Clara swallowed. "I understand the position you placed yourself in when you displayed a false map." His expression hardened. "Apologize." The word fell with quiet force. Clara looked at him, at the man whose title could ruin her reputation with a sentence, and felt the old instinct to retreat. Her mother had taught her that dignity sometimes required silence. But silence had never changed a lie into truth. "I cannot." Julian stepped closer. "You will apologize for publicly challenging my judgment." "I will apologize for causing offense," Clara said, her voice trembling only slightly. "But I will not apologize for what I saw." His eyes held hers. "You are very certain of yourself." "No, Your Grace. I am certain of the map." Something shifted in his face then, so fleetingly that she could not name it. He reached for the portfolio and opened it. Clara watched his eyes move across her original survey, following the boundary lines she had painstakingly reconstructed from parish records. His silence lasted longer than she expected. At last he closed the portfolio. Apologize or leave Bellamere tonight. The cruelty of the choice struck harder because he spoke so calmly. Clara gathered her gloves. If those are my choices, she whispered, then I choose the truth. She walked through the library doors without looking back. Outside, rain swept across the courtyard, silver beneath the lamps. Clara climbed into her waiting carriage with tears burning behind her eyes, refusing to let them fall until Bellamere disappeared into the darkness. Only then did she open her portfolio. A folded piece of parchment lay between her maps. She had never seen it before. On its faded corner, in hurried black ink, someone had written 7 words. If they build here, the village will die. Clara stared at the message as the carriage rolled into the storm, suddenly understanding that the false map was only the beginning. And beneath those words was a seal she recognized immediately, the ancient crest of Bellamere itself, pressed into wax so carefully that it could only have come from someone within the Duke's household, someone who had expected Clara to discover it that night. By morning, Clara's refusal had become the favorite scandal of the county. At breakfast tables behind embroidered curtains, women repeated the story with delighted horror. In drawing rooms warmed by coal fires, gentlemen embellished it until Clara had apparently shouted at the Duke, insulted his bloodline, and threatened to expose the entire estate. None had been present when she spoke. That mattered little. Society preferred a dramatic lie to an inconvenient truth. Clara read one particularly vicious account while sitting beside the narrow window of her mother's cottage. Rain traced silver paths down the glass. Her mother, Agnes, poured tea without comment. You need not read it, Agnes said. I need to know what they believe. And what do you believe? Clara folded the newspaper. That the map was altered. Agnes studied her daughter's face. Then hold fast to that. Reputation can be rebuilt. Conscience is harder. Clara wanted to believe her. Yet beneath her certainty lived a more troubling thought. The parchment bearing Bellamere's seal had not appeared by accident. Someone had chosen her, someone who knew she would notice what others ignored. Before noon, a carriage stopped outside. Mr. Edmund Hale, Bellamere's elderly librarian, descended slowly, carrying a small mahogany box. He had served 3 generations of Ashcombes and possessed the cautious manner of a man who had survived too many secrets. I have something for you, Miss Whitmore. Clara did not invite him inside until he had looked twice toward the road. When he opened the box, a brass compass rested upon dark velvet. Its surface was scratched with age, but its workmanship remained exquisite. It belonged to the late Duke, Hale said. Why bring it to me? Because he believed maps could lie. Clara frowned. Hale turned the compass over. On its underside, nearly hidden beneath tarnish, were engraved 6 words. Never mistake possession for ownership. Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Where did you find this? I did not. Then who gave it to you? The old librarian's eyes flickered toward the window. That question is precisely why I must leave. He closed the box, pushed it toward her, and stood. Wait. Hale paused. The railway. He said nothing. Is it connected to Ashmere? His silence answered. Then he whispered, Do not trust every document bearing a seal. Before Clara could ask another question, he was gone. That afternoon, Julian stood alone in Bellamere's library, staring at the map Clara had challenged. He had ordered it removed from the ballroom, yet its false boundary seemed more accusing now that no audience remained. He summoned the estate steward and requested the original survey. There was a long hesitation. Your Grace, the original is unavailable. Unavailable? It was transferred to the railway office. Julian's jaw tightened. Who authorized that? The steward lowered his eyes. Lord Vale. Julian dismissed him. For the first time, suspicion entered the Duke's mind without permission. He remembered Clara's words, I am certain of the map. Not angry. Not theatrical. Certain. He spent the afternoon comparing old estate books with recent documents. Small discrepancies emerged everywhere. Dates shifted. Measurements changed. Signatures appeared in different hands. Then he found something worse. 3 pages had been cut from his grandfather's ledger. The clean rectangular edges showed that someone had removed them deliberately. That evening, Julian confronted Sebastian in the smoking room. His friend stood before the fire, wine in hand, perfectly composed. You have been altering my records. Sebastian smiled. Be careful, Julian. Suspicion is an ugly habit in a duke. I found missing pages. Old papers disappear. Estates are not museums. And the railway boundary? Approved by your advisors. Not by me. Sebastian's smile faded. You signed the preliminary agreement. Julian looked toward the fire. He remembered signing a stack of documents weeks earlier, trusting the summaries placed before him. I did. Then the matter is settled. No, Julian said quietly. It is not. Sebastian stepped closer. Do not let that girl make you foolish. Julian's eyes hardened. Do not speak of her again. The word surprised them both. Later that night, Julian visited the archive alone. He unlocked the cabinet his grandfather had once kept sealed and discovered an incomplete index of the estate's oldest surveys. One location was marked repeatedly in faded ink. St. Orizen's Chapel. He remembered Clara's mysterious compass. Meanwhile, miles away, Clara placed the brass instrument on her desk. Its needle trembled, spun once and then settled. Not north. Toward the west. Toward Bellamere. Toward the abandoned chapel. She stared at it until the candle flame guttered. Then came 3 quiet knocks at the door. When Clara opened it, no one stood outside. Only a sealed envelope lay upon the threshold. Inside was a single sentence written in the same hand as the warning parchment. Bring the compass to St. Orizen's before the Duke discovers what his grandfather buried. Clara's heart pounded. Because beneath the message was a second seal. Not Bellamere's. The seal of Lord Sebastian Vale. Clara read the name twice. Sebastian had spoken to her only once, yet she remembered the courteous smile, the polished manners, and the effortless confidence with which he had dismissed her concern at dinner. Could he be the architect behind the altered map? She resisted the conclusion. A wise investigator distrusted convenient answers. At Bellamere, Julian reached the same uneasy possibility from the opposite direction. Sebastian had always been charming when questioned and offended when challenged. Now, for the first time, Julian wondered whether friendship had made him careless. Neither knew that the other was searching for the same truth. Neither understood why the mysterious sender had chosen them both. Clara folded the letter and slipped it beneath her bodice. Fear whispered that she should burn it. Courage answered more quietly. She would go to the chapel. But she would not go alone in trust. She would go prepared to discover that the greatest danger might not be hidden beneath the chapel at all there. The chapel stood beyond the western gardens, where the manicured lawns surrendered to thorn bushes and wind-bent yew trees. By midnight, St. Orizen's looked less like a place of worship than a forgotten tomb. Moonlight slipped through broken arches, silvering the weeds that climbed over the stones. Clara arrived first. She carried the brass compass beneath her cloak and a small lantern in one gloved hand. She had told her mother she was visiting a former colleague, a lie that tasted bitter even before she spoke it. Yet some truths demanded danger before they could be safely spoken. The chapel door groaned when she pushed it open. Inside, dust softened every surface. An overturned prayer bench lay beneath the shattered window, and faded saints watched from fragments of painted glass. Clara raised her lantern. Miss Whitmore. She spun around. Julian stood in the doorway. He wore a dark traveling coat, rain shining across his shoulders, and his expression was guarded enough to conceal whatever had brought him there. You followed me. I followed the compass. Clara's fingers tightened around it. How did you know? Because I found the same reference in my grandfather's records. For several moments neither moved. The Duke stepped inside and closed the door against the wind. I owe you an apology, he said. Clara looked at him carefully. For which part? His mouth almost curved, but the humor vanished before becoming a smile. For ordering you to apologize. The admission unsettled her more than anger would have. I was wrong, he continued. Not merely about the map. About you. Clara lowered her gaze. You believed I wanted to embarrass you. I believed you had forgotten your position. And now? Now I suspect I have forgotten mine. The words remained between them, strangely intimate. Clara turned away before he could see how deeply they affected her. Your Grace, I did not come here for apologies. I know. Then why are you here? To discover whether my family built its reputation upon a lie. His voice had lost its aristocratic certainty. Clara heard something beneath it, exhaustion. They searched the chapel together. The brass compass led them toward the altar, its needle trembling whenever Clara stepped near the old stonework. Julian knelt and examined the floor. There, he said. A narrow crack ran beneath the altar. Together they moved the heavy stone slab. Beneath it was a shallow compartment containing a leather ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Clara lifted it carefully. The pages smelled of damp earth and age. Julian read the first entry. His face changed. What is it? He turned the ledger toward her. It was his grandfather's private survey record. The original boundary of Ashmere was clearly marked, and beside it appeared a warning written in an older hand. "Protected common land," Clara whispered. Julian continued reading. The village did not belong to Bellamere. It had never been legally transferred. More troubling still, the railway agreement had been prepared using a boundary that existed only on the altered map. Julian closed his eyes. "I signed it." "You did not know." "That does not make my signature meaningless." Clara watched him struggle beneath the weight of inherited responsibility. "My father used to say that a duke protects his people by making decisions others cannot bear to make." "Perhaps," Clara replied, "but protection without truth becomes control." He looked at her. The lantern flame moved between them. "I have spent my life believing that silence was strength. And now I think silence may simply be fear wearing a respectable coat." Clara smiled despite herself. It was the first smile Julian had seen from her since the ballroom. He noticed. She noticed him noticing. The air seemed suddenly smaller. Julian reached for the ledger, but Clara placed her hand over his. Neither moved. His voice softened. "You were not afraid of me." "I was." "Then why did you defy me?" "Because being afraid does not make you wrong." His eyes remained fixed on hers. For one fragile moment, the Duke seemed less like a powerful man and more like someone asking permission to be understood. "I admired your courage before I understood it," he confessed. Clara's heartbeat quickened. "That is a dangerous thing to say to a woman you once ordered from your house." "I know." She withdrew her hand. "We have evidence now. We must make it public." Julian nodded. "Yes. No secret settlement. No private arrangement. No protection for your reputation at the expense of the villagers." His expression hardened with determination. "I give you my word." The chapel seemed warmer. Julian slowly released her hand, yet neither of them stepped apart. In the darkness, Clara could hear his breathing beside hers, steady but strained. He whispered that whatever happened next, he would not permit Sebastian to turn her courage into evidence against her before the county. Then footsteps sounded outside. Both froze. Someone was approaching. Julian extinguished the lantern. They stood in darkness, listening as the chapel door opened slowly. A man entered carrying a lamp. Through the narrow crack between the altar stones, Clara saw the unmistakable silhouette of Lord Sebastian Vale. He walked directly toward them. Julian's hand closed protectively around Clara's wrist, pulling her behind the altar. Sebastian stopped beside the stone compartment. For several seconds he remained motionless. Then he smiled. "I wondered how long it would take the Duke to find his grandfather's little secret." Clara felt Julian stiffen beside her. Sebastian crouched and touched the empty compartment. "So," he murmured, "you have already taken the ledger." He stood. His voice became colder. "Then tomorrow, Your Grace, I shall make certain the county believes you stole it." Clara looked toward Julian. He was no longer afraid for himself. He was afraid for her. And in that silent instant, she understood something far more dangerous than the forged map. The scandal was no longer about land. It was about who would be believed when the truth finally entered the light. The following morning, Bellamere woke beneath a pale sky, unaware that its most powerful family stood upon the edge of disgrace. Clara heard the rumor from a shopkeeper who lowered his voice while wrapping her parcel. She thanked him without protest, then walked home through streets glazed with rain. What frightened her was how easily society believed a woman could be discredited once she challenged a powerful man. At Bellamere, Julian stood before his council with the recovered ledger locked inside a leather case. His advisors urged silence. One warned that admitting uncertainty would damage the family name. Another suggested blaming Clara entirely and allowing the railway agreement to proceed. Julian listened without interruption. Then he said, "You mistake reputation for honor." The room fell silent. His steward stared at him. "Your Grace, my reputation can survive embarrassment. My conscience cannot survive deliberate injustice." It was the first time Julian had openly opposed the machinery that had governed his life. Yet he knew words alone were insufficient. He ordered the railway documents brought before him. Among them lay a private letter bearing Sebastian's seal. It contained payments made to a surveyor several months before the altered map appeared. Julian read it twice. Sebastian had not merely benefited from the false boundary. He had financed its creation. But Julian also discovered something that wounded him more deeply. His own signature appeared beneath the final agreement. He had trusted Sebastian. That trust now looked like negligence. By afternoon, Julian rode to Clara's cottage. She opened the door before he could knock twice. Her expression was guarded. "If you have come to command another apology," she said, "I have none to offer. I came to give you something." He handed her the railway letter. Clara read it slowly. When she looked up, her anger had changed into something quieter. "You believe me. I should have believed you before." She held his gaze. "That is not the same as believing the evidence." "No," Julian said. "But it is the beginning of learning to listen." He stepped inside only after she moved aside. Rain whispered against the windows, making the room feel protected from the hostile world outside. "You could have protected yourself," he said. "You could have apologized and kept your position. I considered it." "Why did you refuse?" Clara lowered her eyes. "Because my father spent his final years repairing maps for men who changed boundaries whenever money demanded it. He taught me that lines on paper decide who eats, who pays, and who is forgotten. If I knowingly drew a lie, I would become part of the harm." Julian absorbed her words. "My father taught me something similar," he said. "Only he called it duty. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps we were both taught incomplete truths." Their eyes met. Julian reached toward the map on her desk but stopped before touching it. "I have spent years believing strength meant never admitting fear. And now I know fear can make a man defend the wrong thing simply because it belongs to him." Clara's expression softened. "You are afraid?" "Yes." "Of losing Bellamere?" He looked directly at her. "Of discovering what I might have become if you had not challenged me." The confession lingered between them. Then Clara noticed something. The railway letter contained a second page, folded beneath the first. She opened it and found a list of payments. At the bottom was a name neither expected. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe. Clara's face went pale. Julian took the page from her. "My aunt." Before either could speak, the door opened. Lady Beatrice entered without waiting to be announced. She looked older than she had the night of the ballroom, but there was no surprise in her expression. "I wondered when you would find that," she said. Julian's voice hardened. "You knew." "I knew enough. You allowed me to accuse Miss Whitmore. I allowed you to reveal what kind of man you were becoming." Clara stared at her. Lady Beatrice crossed the room and placed a small key upon the table. "Your grandfather kept one final record hidden beneath the family chapel. Sebastian never found it." Julian picked up the key. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because you would have protected the family before you protected the truth." Her words struck with cruel precision. Then she turned toward Clara. "I placed the first map in your portfolio." Clara inhaled sharply. "You?" "Yes." Julian looked between them, stunned. Lady Beatrice continued, "I knew Sebastian was altering the records. I lacked the courage to confront him publicly, and I knew my nephew would trust me least if I demanded he question his closest friend." She gestured toward the key. "Tomorrow the county assembly will hear the railway petition. If you want the truth believed, you must bring the original record before everyone." Julian closed his fingers around the key. "I will." Lady Beatrice's eyes settled on him. "No, Julian. You will not merely present the evidence. You will confess your own signature." Silence filled the room. Clara understood immediately. If Julian admitted signing the agreement, he would destroy the convenient image of himself as an innocent duke deceived by a friend. He would have to confess that his own negligence had helped create the crisis. Julian looked at Clara. For once he did not ask what she thought. He simply said, "Then tomorrow I will tell them everything." Outside, church bells began to ring across Bellamere. The sound seemed to announce not a wedding nor a funeral, but the end of one life and the beginning of another. And Clara realized that tomorrow's hearing would decide far more than the fate of a village. It would decide whether Julian Ashcombe was brave enough to lose his name in order to deserve it. Morning came to Bellamere beneath a hard silver sky, and by 9 o'clock every road leading toward the county assembly was crowded with carriages. Villagers arrived in plain coats and weathered bonnets. Gentlemen came wrapped in dark wool and confidence. Clara entered through the side doors carrying the original ledger beneath her arm. Julian followed moments later, not as a distant duke surrounded by servants, but as a man walking toward judgment with nothing left to hide. The assembly hall glittered with chandeliers, yet the atmosphere felt colder than winter. Sebastian Vale stood near the magistrates, immaculate in a charcoal coat, smiling as though the outcome had already been purchased. Lady Beatrice sat silently behind Julian, her hands folded over her cane. When the chairman called the meeting to order, Sebastian rose first. He spoke smoothly of progress, employment, investment, and the glorious future awaiting Bellamere. Then he produced the altered survey and accused Clara of creating confusion for personal advantage. Julian rose. Before Miss Whitmore answers, he said, "I must answer for myself." The room became utterly still. He walked to the center table and placed his signed railway agreement before the assembly. "I authorized this document." Sebastian's expression changed. Julian continued, "I signed it without examining the original boundary records. I trusted men who had no right to my trust, and because of that failure, an injustice nearly became law." Julian looked toward his advisors. "I will not conceal my negligence merely because my title makes concealment convenient." Sebastian stepped forward. "Your Grace, you are allowing this woman to manipulate you." Julian turned toward him. "No, Lord Vale. She merely refused to allow me to manipulate myself." Sebastian's smile vanished. He demanded proof. Clara opened the ledger. She placed the original survey beside the altered map and explained the discrepancies one by one. Her voice remained steady as she described the old church road, the protected common land, and the stream that supplied Ashmere. Then she produced Sebastian's private letter. The payment records were undeniable. A surveyor had been paid to redraw the boundary. Sebastian stared at the document. "This proves nothing." "It proves enough," Lady Beatrice said. Everyone turned. She rose slowly. "I placed the first map in Miss Whitmore's portfolio." Julian looked at her. His aunt continued, "I knew someone was altering the estate records. I also knew that my nephew had become so devoted to protecting the Ashcombe name that he might mistake exposure for betrayal." Her voice trembled, but she did not retreat. "I was afraid." Sebastian tried to interrupt, but the magistrates demanded his correspondence. One letter contained the final proof. He had arranged for the railway company to purchase the disputed land after the false boundary was accepted. His profit would have been enormous. The room erupted. Villagers shouted. Several investors demanded explanations. Sebastian's polished composure collapsed beneath the weight of his own handwriting. Julian remained still. He could have ordered Sebastian arrested through influence, but instead he turned to the magistrates. "Let the law decide what punishment is deserved." The railway agreement was suspended. The disputed land was restored to the villagers, and the stream was placed under permanent protection. Clara stood beneath the stone portico, breathing deeply. Julian approached, stopping several respectful feet away. "It is finished," he said. "No," Clara replied. "It has begun." He smiled faintly. "You are determined never to let me have the final word. Only when your final word is wrong." His expression softened. "I deserve that." He looked toward the wet gardens. "When I told you to apologize or leave, I believed I was defending Bellamere. You were defending yourself." "Yes. I thought losing authority would make me less of a duke. Instead, I discovered that refusing truth was making me less of a man." Clara's heart tightened. "You have changed. I had an excellent teacher." She looked at him. "You mean the evidence?" "I mean you." The confession was quiet enough that only she could hear it. Julian stepped closer. "I will not ask you to become obedient to my world. I will not ask you to surrender your work, your name, or your voice. If I ever ask you for anything, it will be because I have learned to ask rather than command." Clara felt tears gather in her eyes. "And what would you ask? Would you remain at Bellamere, Clara? Not as its mapmaker alone, and certainly not as a woman beneath my authority, but as the woman whose truth changed the meaning of my title?" She smiled through her tears. "I would remain on one condition." "Name it." "My maps will continue to bear my own name. Always." "And if I tell you that you are wrong?" His smile deepened. "Then I shall hope you are." The villagers would remember the day not because a duke had saved them, but because a woman without a title had stood before power and refused to decorate a falsehood with polite silence. That memory would outlive the scandal, the railway, and whispered judgment. Their wedding was modest, held beneath flowering hawthorn trees in early spring. Clara wore ivory silk without excessive jewels. Julian wore no military decorations, only the simple signet ring of his family. When he took her hand, he did not call her his possession. He called her his equal. Years afterward, visitors to Bellamere often paused before a framed map hanging in the great hall. Beneath Clara's signature were words Julian had ordered engraved. "Truth may cost a person comfort, reputation, and certainty. But a life built upon truth will never require an apology for being honest." And so the woman who had once been told to apologize or leave became the woman who taught a duke that love was not obedience, dignity was not silence, and a title meant nothing unless the person wearing it had the courage to deserve it. In the end, Clara learned that telling the truth may cost you comfort, acceptance, and even the approval of those in power, but losing your integrity costs far more. She was told to apologize for speaking the truth, yet she chose courage over fear, and her honesty ultimately changed not only the fate of a village but the heart of a duke. The greatest lesson is simple. Never silence your conscience just to protect someone's pride. True love does not demand obedience. It respects honesty, courage, and equality. Sometimes, walking away from what is wrong is the very step that leads you toward what is right. If Clara's story touched your heart, like this video, share it with someone who needs this message, comment your thoughts below, and follow/subscribe for more emotional Victorian love stories. And remember, the truth may make you stand alone for a moment, but it can change your entire life in the end. Red Heart.